Hey there, and welcome to this week's edition of the Life and Legacy Show, sponsored by the Seckler Law Firm, where great families make great plans. My name is Tim Seckler. I am the owner of a thing called the Seckler Law Firm, where we do estate planning, elder law work, and post-death administration work, which means, we get to know our families pretty well, and we get to understand some of what happens through the good times and a lot of what happens through the bad times with families. And as a result of the lessons that we learn doing this stuff, obviously that impacts how we do the planning that we do to support our families. And I go through this process every quarter of taking a look at how the law firm is operating and getting together with my leadership team and really thinking through what we want to get done in the next quarter and what happens if this goes well and what happens if it doesn't go well. And so we have this plan for what if life goes great and what if life doesn't go great? And then, we know how we're going to respond. And I feel like in a business, the correct pace for doing that type of thing is about once a quarter. And it occurs to me as we've been going through this process, we're beginning the second quarter here, is that there's a lot that goes through that process that is very similar to how we do estate planning, right? And what we're really wrestling with is what to expect and how are we going to react, right? What can we expect and how are we going to react if that occurs or if this occurs? And at the end of the day, that's really what estate planning is like. What to expect if life goes great, what to expect if life doesn't go so great, and can we have a roadmap? Can we have a plan in place? And so that's what I want to chat with you is how to create sort of your own roadmap for how this goes. Now, if you're new to the show, you'll know that I'd like you to know that the law firm really only sees three types of cases. We do estate planning cases, writing wills and trusts, which is usually what the topic of the radio show is about. We also do post-death administration work for families who have lost a loved one and maybe you're being asked to be the executor or the trustee. And then we do a fair amount of work for people who are in like a long-term care nursing home situation. They're going through a whole bunch of money, and they reach out to our law firm to see if there's anything that we can do to protect assets. Because if you're not aware, this sort of government rule book is fails a lot of our seniors, but there are opportunities for the people who take the time to learn and educate themselves on the opportunities. And so we like to do that education. And as I sit back and really think about what is it all about? What is it all about? Why do we do what we do? And it's something like this. I don't think that people work their entire lives, 30, 40, 50 years, working hard, trying to save money, maybe raising kids, maybe devoted to a nonprofit mission, maybe, just trying to get the most out of life. And to run a risk of if something goes bad, if I get sick, if I end up disabled, when I pass away, that all of my plans aren't off track, right? When I work with young families, for example, one of the things that we tell them is plan A is live into your 90s, and this estate plan we're writing today, we're never going to actually use and implement because nothing wrong will happen to you young. But sometimes planes do crash, right? And so if we're really committed to the future of your kids, if we're really wanting to make sure that we're not just checking the box here, but we also have a plan that will work to support your children, have them grow up to be the great humans that we want them to be, that takes a little bit more planning, right? And so I want to get into some of this stuff today. Before we get into the legal technical stuff, I need to do my disclaimer that I need you to remember this is a radio show for your education and for your information. This is not meant to be legal advice. If you have a legal problem, if you need help with an estate plan, we're available whenever you want to get started at secklerlawfirm.com, SECHLER lawfirm.com, or give us a call, 724-841-1393. Okay, so let's hop into this. So here's the thing. It's outside of our control largely, how some of this stuff is going to go. It's kind of outside of my control to some extent. if somebody blindsides me and hits my car and now I'm disabled. It's outside of my control if I have a heart attack. It's outside of my control if I have a stroke. These things are sort of outside of my control, right? And I think as we're all aging and planning and raising kids, we're all thinking about, our later years. It's really difficult for people to live in the present, right? I mean, so yesterday's a memory, tomorrow's a dream, and a lot of people don't focus on the right now. But if we're focusing on tomorrow being the dream, I need to focus on it being a dream and what happens if it's a nightmare, and if there's anything we can do. So I want to live into my late 80s in good health. I want to raise good kids who provide me with lots of future grandbabies, and I hope that all works, except that sometimes for some families it doesn't. And so how do we plan for this? And remember, the state of Pennsylvania, and every other state, has a rule book for you. So if you become incapacitated and you haven't taken steps to do any other planning, the state of Pennsylvania has to be able to answer that question, because this is a period of time where you've lost control, right? So if I have a stroke, if I'm in a coma, I've now lost my decision making. I've lost control. And so the state has to have a mechanism to get it back. Now, the thing is, a lot of the time with these state and court systems, we just don't want anything to do with them, because to the extent, at least this is my priority with my own family, to the extent I can prevent the government getting involved in how my kids are raised, to the extent I can prevent the government, taxman, creditors to taking my treasure, my savings that I would prefer to be used for my children, well, then, that's the thing I want to plan for. But if you don't do any planning, you need to understand that the state has a rule book for you. They have a plan for you. You probably just don't like what it says, right? Which is why we need to do some planning for incapacity. So there's really three time periods that matter here. While I'm alive and well, which is when you need to do the planning. If I get sick and I'm incapacitated, and then later after I pass away, what happens next? And these are the three time periods that we need to focus on when we're doing an estate plan. So right now I'm alive and well. I'm in good health. My wife is in good health. I'm knocking on wood. My kids are in good health. But things can change. And if things change and now we're incapacitated, well, we got to have some documentation so that we can avoid the guardianship court system that would step into play there. To the extent we can, we want to avoid the government getting involved in our lives. And so then that means that we need to do a document called a power of attorney to name alternative decision makers. It means I need to do some documents to indicate my healthcare desires so that the people who are actually communicating with the doctors know how I want to be treated. And then we've got to provide some instructions around how the money's going to be managed. So this is where more advanced estate planning comes into play, because there's two different types of estate planning. There's estate planning for people who have been told their whole lives, hey, you need to get a will, you need to get a will. My dad's telling me I need to get a will. My mom, my pastor, my neighbor across the fence, everybody's telling me I need to get a will. And so finally I got a will. Maybe I got one on the internet, maybe I got one from an attorney, but I've got a will, check mark, don't have to think about this thing again. But the problem with this is that a will is designed really to only deal with one situation, and that is who gets the stuff that I own in my own name when I pass away. All right, so if I own the asset and I die, the will says who's the executor. That's kind of the person in control, though the court system is really in control. And then it says who's supposed to get the money. All right, fine. Those are good, important questions to answer. But a document like a will, or a document like a power of attorney, which we already discussed, does not make a plan, right? An estate plan goes beyond having a document. An estate plan includes, if you will, a system of documents working together, and a system of organizing your legal interests in different types of assets to make sure that your plans actually work. And I'll give you an example of why just having a document doesn't get it done. So let's say you went to a lawyer and they said, all you need is a will. Okay. Well, if a will only deals with what happens after I pass away, then by definition, a will doesn't do anything to protect my money while I'm alive, right? What happens if I run into creditor issues? What happens if I'm in an accident? What happens if I'm disabled? What happens if I end up in a nursing home? For a lot of our seniors, nursing homes, $150,000 plus a year, that's a pretty significant financial hit to take And a lot of families are ill prepared for this. But if you rely on a last will and testament to be your primary estate planning document, then you haven't dealt with any of those other questions, right? Now, one of the things that a will does nicely is a will can say what happens and deal with some other important issues after you pass away. For example, in a will, you could say, what happens to the money if my minor children inherit? Should they get it outright at 18, 21, 25, 30? Who's in control until those years? You can set up a post-death trust. A will can set up a trust for the benefit of your kids that will answer those sort of control and access questions. Who's making the decisions? What are they allowed to do? When can they distribute money for my kids? Now, the problem, though, and why a lot of people move away from wills is because wills have to go through the probate system. And like I said before, at least as far as my family is concerned, if I can keep my family out of the courthouse, if I can keep my family out of the fingers of the government control, I'm going to do it because I watch what goes on in the news, and some of it's local, more of it's national. But look, I don't like the way that some of these things are going. And I don't want some of these people who have very different interests than mine in control of how my kids are going to be raised. Period. End of story. And so I'm gonna write my own rule book. And that's where an estate plan really comes in, you see, is the estate plan cannot just dictate who gets your stuff when you pass away. Your estate plan can also honor your morals and your values and the way that you want this money to be treated and the impact that you want to have on the world. And that's how an estate plan can come together. This is the type of stuff. So if you turned in late to the radio show, um, you're listening to the Life and Legacy Show, sponsored by the Seckler Law Firm. My name is Tim Seckler. I'm a certified elder law attorney and spend a lot of my time doing estate planning. And we do this radio show to give you the information you need to know in order to protect yourself from the other folks that would like to have your money. And we want to make sure that you have the decision-making authority and the control to have your funds, your assets, treat your family the way that you would prefer to do it in the event life throws you a curveball. And the way that we teach people this stuff, we're an education-first law firm. We host a heck of a lot of educational workshops around the city of Pittsburgh. We have them north, south, east, west. But you can sign up at secklerlawfirm.com and come check out what we've got to say. SECHLER lawfirm.com. And register for one of our 3 Secrets to Protect Your Family and Your Money workshops. Now, here's the thing. I tend to use a lot of trusts in my estate plan because one reason we like to use trusts is because generally speaking, trust can be used as a vehicle to manage these types of things. Who's got the decision-making authority? Who's in control? Who's got access to the money? We can use trusts to manage these things without the necessity of government involvement. So we don't need to have judges involved a lot of the time with trust. We can avoid the probate system. We can avoid judges get involved with my kids. And so we use trusts as a vehicle to manage the affairs without the necessity of a whole bunch of government involvement, which to me, I think matters a lot. Now, other types of trusts can be used to protect assets from nursing homes, for tax planning, for charitable planning purposes, for all types of planning purposes. And so which trust is right for you or which combination of trusts is right for you is dependent on what your goals are. So don't let anybody tell you all you need is this tool or that tool without first getting some education about what your goals should be in the first place. And so the way that we like to look at this is we have our new clients go through a series of classes, understanding what goes bump in the night, understanding the real risks. Let's talk about taxes. Let's talk about nursing home. Let's talk about what happens if your kids go through a divorce. Let's talk about what happens if somebody gets disabled. Let's talk about what these issues are so that then you can decide if they are priorities for you to address. And once we understand what the issues are, then we can talk to you about which tools may be appropriate to address those new concerns or those new goals, right? So we have this multiple classroom type approach. So the first one, like I said, you can register for free on our website. It's called the 3 Secrets Workshop. If you like what we have to say at the 3 Secrets Workshop, we bring you back to a second workshop that is called our Blueprint Workshop. Now, at the Blueprint Workshop, that's where you get to make some decisions on what your estate plan is going to end up saying and then we continue to work with you one-on-one for a while to make sure that the documents continue to reflect your goals and desires. And then we have a relationship with you on long term through a thing that we call the Red Wagon Club to make sure that if your goals and desires change over time, the estate plan can change too to reflect what it is that you actually want to have happen. All right. Now, let's take a step back. All right. And say that generally speaking, people come to see law firms for estate planning in three different situations. The first is young families who have little kids and want to make sure that the kids are well protected. The second time is like what I'll call sort of like the empty nesters. It's kids are, if I had kids, they're now in their 20s and 30s. I'm not so much worried about them burning themselves on the stove, but I got new concerns. I got new concerns around their behavior. I got new concerns around their marital decisions. I've got new concerns about um, are they actually ready to be, mature adults in this planet? And then the third time time period when people come to see us is more their like retirement and senior years, and usually around that time the goal changes to okay, so this is actually probably the estate plan that we're going to use, not just the just in case estate plan. And now what we're concerned about at that period of time is usually asset protection. We've worked hard to accumulate our stuff at this point in time. We want our stuff to get to our people. We would prefer for it to not fall into the grasp of the government or the long-term care system. So we want to protect assets from dementia and Alzheimer's disease. We want to make sure that if those things happen, we've got proper controls in place. And then how do we make sure that, assuming there are some leftovers, and there's going to be a wealth transfer that takes place where the stuff is going to go from my family to from me to my kids. How do we do that in a way that's responsible, right? And we and at the secular law firm tend to use a lot of trust to manage these things because those are the goals. Those are typically sort of the mind frames that people are in when they come to see us. But we can accomplish all these goals without the need of the courthouse and all the rest. But here's a couple of different things. We usually like to set up a trust for our clients. Now, the type of trust or the combination of trust will vary depending on which stage that we just outlined. But in a lot of situations, at least working with our family, with our law firm, the primary vehicle that your estate plan would be some type of a trust, right? And so we set up your trust. So then your trust has in probably a house and some money, and what goes on with that house and what goes on with that money is a result of the instructions that this new trust document provides. Okay, so what happens is I put my stuff into a trust. I'm probably going to retain some control over this trust, maybe some access, depending on the type of trust. And this trust is the vehicle that's going to manage my assets. It's going to own the assets and I'm in control of it. You can think of it, it's kind of like a company in a way, right? So the secular law firm is a company. It's its own thing, but I'm essentially the CEO of the company. So I get to make a lot of the decisions around here, right? So when you set up a trust, it's kind of like setting up your own company in a way. You set up this own vehicle to manage your stuff, and it does what you want it to do while you're alive. If depending on your goals is what the trust says. Now, then what happens when you pass away? Well, remember from earlier in today's episode, I said when you pass away, the only thing that goes through a will are the assets in your own name that you own individually, right? Assets in a trust don't go through a will because it's the trust that says upon Tim's death, here's what you do with this stuff. The beautiful thing about trusts is one, they could have been used to protect assets from long-term care expenses ahead of time. But the other nice thing is we usually are able to administer a trust around a conference table rather than in the courthouse, which tends to save some time, some headache, and keeps the government a little bit out of my business in a way. Now, one of the things that happens, is you have your trust, and then when you pass away, now it's time for distribution to go to your family, your favorite charity. Okay. But the way I like to do the planning, the way that we do our planning is we generally don't give your family members, let's just say kids for today's purposes, we generally don't give your kids their own inheritance outright because the next thing that most people are concerned about is what happens if my kid gets sick or what happens if my kid goes through a divorce. Is there anything I can do to protect my kid from the curveballs that life is going to throw at them? Can we do anything to protect money? Can we do anything to manage control and make sure that like if I give money to my kid, I want the money to go to my grandkids, not my son-in-law I don't like, those types of things. And so what we do is we generally are going to give our clients' children their inheritance in their own trust, what we call the kids' trust or the separate share trust. So let's say that I have two kids. When I pass away, there's going to be two separate trusts that are set up for the benefit of the kids. Now, the question with any trust is who's in control of it, meaning who's the trustee of the trust, and who are the beneficiaries, meaning who's allowed to use the stuff in the trust. Okay, so we've got trust for the benefit of the kids. Now, let's say for me personally, my kids are young, right? I've still got an 8-year-old in the house. Well, I'm not putting an 8-year-old in charge of her inheritance, right? I probably wouldn't put her in charge of her inheritance at 25. I run my estate plan with somebody else in control until age 30. So then her trust is managed by someone who I trust and I've given some instruction to on how to raise my little girl, right? I mean, here's what's important to me. Here's what's really important to me from an education standpoint, from a quality of life standpoint, from a religious standpoint. Here are the things that matter to me, and these are the ways that I ask the people in charge if I'm gone, to help raise my child, right? These are the guidelines. These are the sort of the guardrails that I'd like you to stay between here. And parenting a child is not an easy thing, but at least we can start with a roadmap. If we got to get somewhere, and getting somewhere when raising little children tends to be raising good human beings. Well, if this is my definition of a good human being, then let's keep it within these parameters on the way there. And if life throws me a curveball, one of the little one-liners I like to use with young families is that good parents plan for their own absence. My job is to get my little girl to be a good human, whether I'm here or not. And we can use estate planning documents to do that. Now, if she were a little older, if my daughter were in her 30s, I might not be so much worried about her managing her money. So now we might be past a period of time where I'm concerned about protecting her from her own decision making. But now, if my little girl's 30, the thing I'm worried about is, listen, no boy is ever going to be good enough for my little girl. And what happens if I leave my little girl some money and then her marriage fails, right? Is this little son of a gun going to walk away with the money I saved and built to provide my daughter a better future? No. So what happens is the way that we like to do it is we create a trust for my daughter. We create a trust for the kid, and then once she turns age 30, she can be her own trustee, which means now she's in control. She makes the decisions once she's gotten old enough, but the money's not subject to her potential divorces and lawsuits because I've put some creditor protection around it. And so now we've got a situation where she can receive her inheritance. It can be protected. She's got control of the money. And I can defend against her potential future divorces and lawsuits and creditor issues. And so, that's to me is just managing appropriately the way that we manage money to meet the goals. And then things like retirement accounts and life insurance, those can funnel to the trust so that we can put those terms and conditions around them for to protect that money as well. So that's kind of how we like to think about this, is first think about what are your goals during your life. Right now you're alive and well. What happens if life throws you a curveball like something like a disability? What happens when you pass away? Who's supposed to get the money? And then what is the next thing we should be concerned about? Should we be concerned about while I'm alive and well, what happens when I get disabled? Should we be a lot concerned about if I'm disabled? Am I concerned about protecting assets from long-term care costs? Once I pass away, of course, we want to get the money to the right people. But then are we concerned about protecting that money from their potential future issues, like divorces and lawsuits and creditor issues? And if the answers to these things are yes, then that's how we coordinate an estate plan, right? It's a set of documents that are coordinated with your financial assets to make sure that the whole thing works. And that's the difference between having a document and having a system, having a set of documents called an estate plan for how things are going to go if life throws you a curveball. And that's the type of stuff that we like to work with our clients on, is having a real plan for your family, not just check the box that I've got a will because somebody told me to get a will. So if you're interested in learning more about how to set your family up for success, how to put some good guidelines around your money so that your goals are actually met, you should come to one of our upcoming 3 Secrets to Protect Your Family workshops. You can sign up for them for free at seclerlawfirm.com, SECHLER lawfirm.com. Register for one of the free workshops. Come learn about the entire process, and let's design the plan that's right for you. So remember, folks, I hope you learned a lot from this episode today. I hope that it was good information for you. But remember, it's not legal advice. If you need legal advice, you need to hire a lawyer. Please check us out at seclerlawfirm.com, SECHLER lawfirm.com, and let's get started on your plan today. So thanks for listening today. See you here next week.